G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and a shorter getting started in Horus Heresy video today. First things first, there are some spoilers, or one in particular, for the new edition of the rules. It is a pre-release image of the Force Organization chart. Yes, it's out there online, but not everyone has seen it, so do be warned. Also, we know the rules have been tweaked ever so slightly between the edition these leaks come from and the final print edition. Therefore, take it with a grain of salt, but I don't think it's changed at all in this particular area that we're going to be looking at. So, moving on from there. Today's episode is about understanding what you're getting in this core set and the Force Organization chart, and understanding what you shouldn't be doing when it comes to the books. So, as with the other videos, our starting point is the core boxed set. Now, this box set appears to be great value financially, but in my opinion, and many others, it's not the best option for a starter set. And essentially a lot of it boils down to there's too many tactical squads without, say, special or heavy weapons options being included in this box. On top of that, the Spartan is not a great starter set vehicle. Awesome vehicle, has its place, has its uses, but in a starting force, it's a bit of an odd duck. And for that reason, I did the previous video on what you should be spending your money on and buying with that in mind, because it's very important to get it right with your purchases. I also don't like the two consoles in here. The Praetors, the HQ options, people are very divided on those. Some people love them. I think more people dislike them than love them based on the comments I've seen, but I also live in my own echo chamber, so anyway, this is the Force Organization chart for the new game of Horus Heresy. So for those who are coming across from 40k and who aren't used to Heresy rules, or for those who haven't played these games before, this chart essentially describes to you how you're supposed to build your army. There are basic requirements, and the basic requirements are the black boxes. What I've done is I've gone ahead and highlighted them. So, starting on the left-hand side, HQ and troops in red. Those are the you must take, regardless of other circumstances, in a basic list. Now, there are ways around this, but they require you to be taking more advanced lists, things like Rights of War, alternative Force Organization charts. They are not what you should be looking at when you're getting an introduction into this game. That is not a healthy way to look into the game or play the game. So avoid doing that from the get-go. So HQ and 2 troops choices. In the box set, you get the stuff that's in blue. So you get 2 additional troops choices, or up to 2 additional troops choices, because you might decide you want to build 2 20-man squads instead of 4 10-man squads as an option. You also get 2 HQ units, not just 1. You get 2 elite choices, you get 1 heavy support, and I'll show them to you what is what in a moment. Now you'll notice I've actually crossed out pretty much the rest of the Force Organization chart, and that's because I don't think you should be looking at it, for the same reasons I stated regarding more advanced options of Force Org chart. So, first of all, allied detachment. How can you even begin to think of putting an allied detachment in if this is your first time playing the game and you don't even know how to play with your original detachment? Keep it simple to start with. Allies is later on, and frankly, they've not done a good job with the Allies matrix, so I could show you that, but it's bad. So don't do it. Just stay away from Allies. It's a down the line. Once you've got your head around the core game, then you can start experimenting with that kind of stuff, regardless of faction. On your primary detachment, I've crossed out Fortification. Fortification is crossed out because they suck, and nobody uses them, and I don't want to discourage you from taking them, but again, in a basic game, why add the complication of adding a fortification in and understanding all those rules when you have to get your head around the rules for your basic guys? It's just confusing, and it's not adding enough to the gameplay to justify even looking at it. I've also crossed out Primarchs. Now, there's a problem with Primarchs, and specifically Primarchs and Lords of War, so I'll cover the two at the same time. They are huge force multipliers in your army. Sometimes they earn their points back, sometimes they do not. But games are not really designed around these units, and they're balanced terribly because of it. Now, it can be a lot of fun sometimes to take these units, but if Primarchs end up in a one-on-one fight, for example, that fight will drag out for most of your game. It will take 4 turns on average for most Primarchs to win a fight against another Primarch, if not more. Depends really on the Primarch. And as you can see up in the very top right, your army size determines how many points you can spend on either a Primarch or your Lord of War, or both. So at 2,000 points, you're allowed to spend a maximum, absolute maximum of 500 points on a Lord of War or a Primarch. That's a problem because many Lords of War and most of the Primarchs, well, not most, we'll say about a quarter of the Primarchs, are in that 500 point zone. So it's not going to happen, and it's not fair if you're playing a certain faction and you get a Primarch and the other guy can't because his Primarch's too expensive for him to buy it. All of a sudden one side has a massive advantage over the other, potentially. That's not great for gameplay purposes. And it gets easier to go at higher points levels, but you'll notice I've actually blocked out a few of the points levels with my little red boxes, and that's because the 3 points levels I've circled out are really the most popular sorts of game sizes you'll be seeing. 2,000, 2,500, and 3,000. Below 2,000 points, you can't even take a Lord of War or a Primarch, so just forget it. Outright, not allowed to take it. And then, obviously, those are the 3 main gameplay points levels. Some Lords of War, like Fellblades, they're pushing your entire Lord of War points limits at the 625 points. The Mastodon is a great example of good luck fitting it into your list. Primarchs like Horus. Horus is 500 points. Magnus is over 500 points. These things add up very quickly. And they're not something you should be taking at 2,000 points, because you take a Primarch at 2,000 points, even if you can fit it in the list, it's going to be a quarter of your army. It doesn't really leave much room to fill out the rest of the army and have a fun, balanced force. You're turning the game from what is supposed to be recreations of a large-scale skirmish in the Horus Heresy. I know it sounds a bit contradictory, large-scale and skirmish, but let's just say 100 models on the table in Horus Heresy standards is a skirmish. It's just large compared to, say, 40k. You're turning the game into something else if it's just a Primarch and 10 Terminators on the table, if you know what I mean. And it is possible to have an army that is just the Primarch, 15 to 20 Terminators, and maybe a transport or 2 in 2,000 points. That is very, very doable. Things like Primarchs are very expensive. So avoid those units, and especially for those of you who are new to the game, or those who have been into the Heresy for a while but never really fully committed to it and you understand the core principles, don't buy them. You're wasting your money. And I say that because you're not going to really get to use them very often. Now, of course, you could ignore the points restrictions and stuff and just play what you feel. Totally cool with that. And feel free to do that in your communities. That's fine. But, you know, if you're going to spend hundreds of dollars on a hobby, or potentially thousands, why would you start your army off with a Lord of War? I get it from a rule of cool and a hobbyist challenge and all that kind of thing perspective. I myself perfectly am down with that. But financially, it's a terrible decision to make. What you want to be doing is focusing on building out the core of your army and building out all those choices. In the video I did previously on getting started in the Horus Heresy, I noted that, hey, I would add, special weapons, heavy weapons, bulk out your scoring units a little more, look at adding heavy support choices and transports. At no point did I suggest Lords of War or Primarchs. I didn't even get onto artillery or fast attack, both of which are vital things to include into these armies. So that should really tell you where these things sit in the list of priorities. Anyway, moving on from there, this is actually what you're getting in the box. So you're getting 2 elites choices in the form of your Contemptor Dreadnought and your Terminator squad. Now, potentially you could break that Terminator squad down to 2 5-man squads, turn into 3 elite choices. You could take the troops. In this case, I've pointed out there's 3 squads. The large 20-man squad at the back, and 2 smaller 10-man squads at the front. At least 2 10-man squads is going to be required at the barest minimum to create a legal army list. And included in that, you're going to have to add a HQ. And that could be the one that's represented by the Sons of Horus character in the center left, or the Imperial Fist character center right. Either one of those HQ choices Personally, I hate both models, so I would say go somewhere else. But for those who are buying this box and are perfectly happy with them, either or would be fine. And lastly, of course, the Spartan Heavy Support. Now, thinking back to that previous limits of points that I spoke about, your tactical squads are going to set you back around 400-500 points in this edition, depends what war gear you put on them. Your HQ, they're probably going to set you back another comfortable 100 points, even for just a Centurion, by the time you give them some war gear and a couple of upgrades. So, we'll say you're probably pushing around 600 points by this point. That Spartan will take you to 1,000. The Contemptor Dreadnought take you to around 1,200, maybe 1,250, again, depending what you equip it with. I'd say 1,200. And the Terminators, they're probably going to add on about another 200 to 300 points, again, depending on war gear, because you purchase the guns and the close combat weapons accordingly in games of Horus Heresy. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're building these lists, that you're probably looking at around a 1,500 point force, and you really, you can add the extra HQ in, go that bit more points, but you should really be looking for stuff outside of this box to complete your army, and stay away from the shiny toys. Cool as they are to paint and as projects, you want stuff that gets you playing on the tabletop faster, not stuff that's just really cool and doesn't even fit in the points limit that you have available. So, last thing for today is the rules. People ask the question a lot, like, what rules do I need? And I only know what I know from leaks and from questioning of staff and such, but essentially the rules you get in that core box is the stuff on the left, the core rules and a quick reference chart. Okay, good start. Core rules are telling you how to play the game. They don't give you rules for your particular units, they just simply say that, hey, this is how far units move, this is what the shooting phase is, this is how you roll your dice. The quick reference sheet is essentially distilling down some of that information to short and condensed versions that once you understand it, you can reference it quickly to get the answer to your questions. The two books on the right are the optional extras. You'll need one of them if you're playing Legions. You don't need them if you're not playing Legions. The Loyalist book contains rules for Loyalist Space Marines, and this is not, Loyalist World Eaters, for example. No, they're not in there. Loyalist Space Marines, the Liber Astartes, contains rules for the Loyalist Legions only, the full Legions. It does not take into account the little renegade bands that swap sides and chop and change here and there. It is the overall majority of Ultramarines were Loyalist, they're in the book. The majority of Imperial Fists are Loyalist, they're in the book. Majority of Dark Angels are... bad example. Traitors, same deal. You will not have Traitor Raven Guard in the Traitor book. You will have Sons of Horus, Word Bearers, Thousand Sons, Death Guard, Night Lords, etc., etc. in that book. So, when you pick up this game and the choice is presented to you which book you've got, well, myself, I'd potentially pick up both books because I run Legions from both sides of the fence. But for other players, die-hard Loyalist players, for example, wouldn't bother to buy the Liber Hereticus book because, well, it's mostly gameplay, not background. That's huge for a start, 340 pages, give or take, of rules and a quick little page on each Legion and 2 pages on artwork for each Legion is not very great considering the black books we come from. So, keep that in mind when you go to purchase. Buy what you need to as a bare minimum, and I would say for most people getting into this hobby, it's core rules and one of the 2 books on the right. Everything else is ancillary to that, and you should really, at a fundamental level, focus on what you need to play games at that 2,000 to 2,500 point level before you go on to including more complex things like fortifications, allies, lords of war, and primarchs. Get the basics right first, or else you're just going to find it a bit of a miserable experience of so many rules and so much flicking back and forth through the rulebook that it becomes overwhelming, and I don't think it will be an enjoyable experience.
Obviously, that's a generalization. There'll be people out there who will digest it very easy, especially people who are familiar with the 7th edition 40k or the current, or I suppose it's now the previous edition of Horus Heresy rules. They will pick it up very quickly. But there'll still be things that confuse you, especially for people who are used to those older editions. Because you're going to be going in and seeing special rules which have changed but have the exact same name, and it's going to confuse you a lot. Haywire is a great example of that, where potentially Haywire in the new edition is 6s to wound, just ignore all armor saves. Okay, that's kind of a big deal. Something people should know, isn't it? Going into it. Versus the old Graviton guns where it was simply just a toughness check and then you just made an armor save as normal, nice and easy. So, yeah, those little changes are going to catch out a lot of players from the original edition. Anyway, that's all from me. I know I brought up some spoilery stuff, and that may annoy some people, but I'm trying to do the best job I can in advance of this stuff coming out so that you guys have the most information possible in order to make informed decisions. And I don't care if it's ever so slightly off or it doesn't suit Games Workshop's release schedule for this information. At the end of the day, you need to know in advance. And they're staying tight-lipped about this stuff. They don't want you to know because they want you to just buy everything. And that's kind of toxic from my perspective. So these episodes are aimed at helping you out. Anyway, that's all from me. I've had my say. Back with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.